Dads, do you want a thriving business that doesn't control you? A passionate marriage and kids that adore you? Do you want to grow deeper in your faith? Be healthier, both physically and mentally? Build more meaningful relationships with your friends? Welcome to the Balanced Business Dad Podcast, where in each episode we dive into balancing and optimizing the 6 pillars of life: faith, health, marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and business. And here are your hosts, pioneers of the Balanced Business Dad movement, Dustin Hogue and R.J. Campbell.
What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Coach Dustin Hogue, and with me always, my distinguished, my elder, my mentor as a husband and a father, Mr. R.J. Campbell.
I'm still here, still kicking it, still making this stuff happen.
Yeah.
Oops, almost cussed already. The first line of the podcast.
Well, it's going to be a fun day. It's going to be a fun day. Guys, I'm excited to talk about this. This is something that has just been on my heart in my personal development thing for a long time. And it's honestly how I've gotten through and developed quite a bit over the past few years. So we're going to jump into it. But first, I'm going to start throwing RJ off with some curveballs real quick, just to really set the tone. But RJ, who are you?
First thing I would say, a Christian.
Love it.
A father.
Love it.
Husband.
Love it.
What if I got those backwards? See if who listens to this podcast first, my wife or one of my 3 kids. So I'm wrong to somebody. That's probably the main one. We could keep digging deeper and deeper. Business owner.
Okay. So I start off with that question because identity is the topic of today's episode, because our identity is what shapes all of our decisions, what shapes kind of our future is what I would say, and kind of how we're going to act in life, right? So when I asked you that question, who are you? You started with Christian.
Yep.
Right? So your Christian ethics, morals, values, when you make decisions, you look through that lens.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what I mean when I say identity. The interesting part is I'm actually reading this book called Your Personality Isn't Permanent, which I know you're supposed to ask that question, because we can change our identity. Now, I know that can be a interesting subject today when you say, how do you identify yourself?
We'll stay away from that one.
It's pretty interesting. So I'm going to tell you a story about how it happened to me when I changed my identity, and what the decisions I started making changed almost immediately. So we've talked before how I went on this health journey, and it was Journey to the Fight. Maybe one of these days we'll post that link. You can watch the documentary that was done on me. But during that time, I'll never forget that I was talking to a real good friend of mine, and it was after my second workout of the day, and he said, "Wow, you're an athlete."
Love that.
And ever since then, well, not ever since then, because I kind of fallen back into some ways, but during the rest of that journey, I considered myself an athlete.
And you never had before?
Never, ever had before.
Even as a young kid playing sports?
No, or didn't really play sports as a kid.
Or picking clover in the outfield while you're on a baseball team.
Yeah, didn't even really do that. Yeah, and right then and there, everything changed. It was easier for me to wake up in the morning and go work out because I was a person who woke up early in the morning and worked out.
I'm an athlete.
Right? So that's what the identity can do to you.
And it can change you.
Absolutely. It will change you.
So this is funny. As typical, we are well scripted in this podcast. We spent 4 minutes preparing. We're going to talk about identity. This is what makes it so cool. So as we've talked about before, maybe you guys know, so I'm a cyclist, bicycling.
Yeah.
And there was a guy that I used to ride with, so I have 100% stolen this from Scott. So when we were out riding in a group and road riding, and we would pass somebody on the road that's jogging on the sidewalk, Scott would always greet them as we went by and say, "Hey, how you doing, athlete?" And you would see the change in this person's face on the spot as they turned to look at us and wave. And these, look at us. 98% of us don't look like an athlete when we're running down the street. And I do that today. When I pass them out, when I am out on my bicycle, and I'm bike riding, if it's road riding, and I pass somebody that's jogging or running, I always greet them that way. And you can see it. You see the smile, because I promise you most of those people have never been called an athlete.
Right. Even though they could be an extreme athlete.
Could be.
There's
Yeah.
just never been, maybe during an award ceremony in high school, right?
Right.
You know, they got the medal kind of thing, but that's really about it. And so when they hear that, they're like, yeah, I am.
Yeah. Because if you ask them, they'd say, oh, I'm a runner, or I like running.
Right.
I wouldn't say I'm an athlete. I
Right.
wouldn't say that about myself.
Right.
But I still do it today from watching Scott do that. It's so cool to see the expression on these people's faces when they turn and wave back at you. Sure, they get home and say something. Man, I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
Some guy called me an athlete.
Right.
So-
Because once we identify ourselves as something, again, we start making these decisions. So I coach a lot of men in this. When you want something, when you want to become better at something, right? If you want to dad up in an area of your life, in one of the pillars of life, it starts 100% the very first thing with identity.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. We always talked about mindset.
Yeah.
So this plays into that. Similar,
100%.
maybe not exactly the same. Part of it, you have to have the right mindset. Part of that mindset is your identity.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, when we hear the word mindset, so many people think of, oh, I have to have a positive mindset. Yeah, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But no, mindset means is, what am I thinking? How do I feel about myself? Right. It goes so much deeper than I just have to have a positive mindset or I'm motivated. Right. The kind of the rah cheerleader aspect of, oh, what's your mindset right now? No, it's who are you?
Who are you?
So think about that. Right. If I want to get better in my faith, I have to identify somebody, or I have to identify myself as someone who's better in my faith,
Mm-hmm.
even before I get to that step. Right. There's a saying out of a book called The Secrets of a Millionaire Mindset by T. Harv Eker. Read it if you haven't.
Not only does he know the books, he always knows the author.
Well, yeah. First of all, if I don't use the author's name, it's a copywriting issue, I'm sure. But anyway, T. Harv says, be, do, have.
So identity first.
Identity first. Absolutely. Be the person that is going to do what that person wants, so then you can have what that person has. And how many of us have ever sat around and be like, you know, when I have this, I'm going to do that, so I'll become this, right?
Right. Wrong order.
Once I lose 100 pounds, then I will go for a walk every day. So then I can become healthy,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So be, do, have is something that I teach my children, something I teach obviously my wife and I learned this together. I actually was blessed enough to be in a course that taught a lesson on be, do, have quite extensively. And it's really changed the way of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day now, any opportunity that comes up, a business opportunity, you know, we're setting in our sign store right now. And when this opportunity came up, it's not, what do I need to do? What do we have to have? How much do we have to have in money? None of that was my first question to myself. It's always, who do I have to become?
We're sign guys now.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I have to identify as a sign guy, somebody who knows how to sell signs and make signs and run an operation, you know, a 7-figure operation. I had to become that person. That's what I had to become.
Interesting. How we identify.
How we identify. The really cool part about this is, and I'm probably going to mess this up, so don't quote me on it, but there's something in our brain called the reticulating activating system, or RAS. Tony Robbins talks a little bit about this and things like that, but the RAS is, the best way to ever explain it is, what color car do you have?
White.
What kind is it?
Honda.
How many white Hondas did you see after you bought that car?
They're everywhere.
Right. And they only showed up the day you bought yours,
Yes,
right?
everybody bought one obviously that same day because then there are white Honda passports everywhere.
Right. Or your RAS now shows you
Yep.
those white Honda passports.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. So we've all experienced it. We all know what that is.
Correct. Now, if we do that with our identity, do you think our brain will start showing us the things we want to see?
Absolutely.
So when I identify myself as an athlete, now I'm seeing things as an athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm hitting the goals as an athlete because my brain doesn't know the difference if I'm an athlete or if I'm not an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I said I was. The brain's like, all right, we're an athlete now.
Okay.
We just
what
move
you
on.
told. That's what you told me.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to do.
And it's a powerful tool.
It's funny you would say that. It's weird how we come up with these things and they click into everything that's happened recently. So I was out with a group of friends 2 weekends ago, and we're at lunch. And these people that some I know well, some I know more casually, or just don't see them very often. And we were just talking about work and just things in life. And one of the guys' wife looks at me and said, "So are you retired?" And this was the first time I'd answered the question with, No, I'm self-employed. I own a couple of businesses. I normally would have said, well, yeah, I retired from corporate America and now I don't know, I would babble on with what it was. That I just remember afterwards, that was the first time. I don't use the term entrepreneur. I don't know why, but I said, no, I'm self-employed. So I own a couple businesses.
Yeah.
And I came back and I told my wife that, and she said, well, that is you now. That's you.
Yeah.
And she says it that way. We met people, we were at a wedding last weekend, and there were people asking what we did, and asked, because we're close enough, because I turned 60 2 weeks ago. So people look at me and say, are you retired? And my wife answered the question and said, no, he owns his business. He's self-employed.
Yeah.
So I guess that identity has finally taken hold.
Yeah.
I didn't do it first.
Now,
But yeah, so now it's definitely how I identify myself as, no, I'm a business owner.
I'm going to make you think back a little bit.
Oh, gosh.
It sounds weird, but when RJ and I rekindled, but when we worked together, then we came back, I was coaching RJ on the real estate investing world.
Yep.
And we talked about identity in a way when people said, what do? You kept on saying, oh yeah, I work for this big five, whatever. And when you switched that, you started getting real estate deals.
Yeah. Because then I started identifying as a real estate investor.
Yeah.
But people would ask, I wouldn't say, yeah, I work for this big company and I'm in this particular industry. Oh, but on the side.
Yeah.
You're right. And it did. It took a while, the same thing.
Yeah.
To realize, no, don't say that. This is what I do.
Yeah. I own a large real estate portfolio compared to some of them. Right.
Yeah, right.
But once you got that in your brain, then you really were.
Then
Then things happened.
Then things happen. Deals suddenly showed up.
Yeah. So identity, we can go so many different ways with this. But what I would talk to all the dads out there about, what do you want your future self to be? Because you're truly in control of designing it.
Mm-hmm. So what do you identify yourself as?
Great question.
So I say, because I never flipped that the other way. Who are you?
Yeah. I start with husband, father, then a coach.
Good answer.
Yeah.
So the same thing. You make your decisions through that lens.
Absolutely.
That trifocal.
Yeah. And it's something that once you start identifying yourself that way, other people will start seeing you that way.
Mm-hmm.
There's been, and it's probably been a few years, I guess, since I started that, but there's still a lot of people out there that know Dustin as the real estate investor.
Right. Definitely.
Right. Dustin, maybe now as the campground owner.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe getting there as the sign company. Right. And a lot of them do as coaches as well. But no, I am a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a coach. And I got that from one of my coaches, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do remember, as we identify with these things, you do make your decisions looking at it. We keep using that same term, but through that lens.
Yeah.
We look at what you do as a husband, as a father, as a business owner. I know that's definitely how I make my decisions. I heard this from somebody else, probably on a podcast, because as Dustin says, I listen to more podcasts than anybody he knows. And it lined up exactly with me. And this person, this gentleman was saying that if he has a decision to make, he says, if I did this, would God be proud of me? Next, would my wife be proud of me? And last, would my kids be proud of me? If he gets a yes on all three of those, then I'll go forward. He said, now, if I get a no on the first one, I usually don't make it a 2 and 3 anyway. If you get a no on 1 or 2, you're not going to then ask your kids, hey, here's a good idea that everybody else says sucks. So that was his lens of decision making. Yeah. So obviously that's how that person identified himself.
Correct.
That's who I'm asking permission of.
So what I ask all the dads out there to do is, again, what do you want your future self to be? Because you get to create it, and then go see what that looks like, right? I'm going to trust that everybody out there says they want to be a good husband. What does that mean to you?
What does that mean?
And then do you identify yourself as a good husband? Because if not, let's talk. Let's switch that on its head and let's start identifying ourselves as a good husband.
Boy, you think of how different you will be this weekend coming up if you identify as a good husband.
Right. What decisions would you do differently?
Yeah. How will you treat your wife? How will you just talk to your wife?
Right.
What will you want to do on the weekend when you're thinking of yourself as, oh yeah, I'm a good husband?
Yeah. If you were asked right now, would you say I'm a good husband?
Yeah, I would.
It's good.
Yeah.
Always?
No, definitely not.
The reality of it is we've all made mistakes as a husband. We've all made mistakes as a father, right? But if somebody would say, oh, are you a good father? And you'd be like, oh, no, not really. Then my God, you're not going to start making good decisions real quick, then aren't you?
Right. So at least you better identify as one.
Exactly.
And then you can start going from there.
You do have.
It's cool shit.
It is.
Finally said it.
Yeah, the identity, right? So, guys, that's what I'm challenging everybody to do today. Again, let's keep this conversation going on, because part of the Dad Up framework that you get joining our free Facebook group, and I'll give you that link in a second. But this is what we do, because we want to be better in all these pillars that we have, right? The pillars is the framework, in our faith, our health, obviously our marriage, being a father, being a friend, and then being a business owner. So, how do you identify in each one of those pillars? And where do you see yourself? Where do you see your future selves? So guys, join the group. Get the Dad Up framework to figure out how to become better in all those things at dadupgroup.com.
Yep.
That'll take you right to the framework, and it shows a video of me explaining the framework, and then you can join the Facebook group right from there.
Free Facebook group.
Yeah.
300 something dads.
And we're going to keep on growing, because this is a movement that we're creating, because we all have to dad up together.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, dads, this is it. Go figure out who you want to identify yourself, and we'll talk to you next time.
Pick one of those 6 pillars and identify yourself better.
I like it.
In one of the 6 pillars. That's the challenge of the week.
I love
That's
it.
a new thing. Challenge of the week.
I like that.
We say those all the time. Next week it'll be a different thing.
A different challenge, different pillar maybe. All right, guys, fantastic. We will talk to you next time, and we'll see you next week.
I'll see you guys.
This is the podcastfactory.com.